The next speaker I'd like to introduce is Riccardo Spagni, Fluffypony from Monero, and he's going to give a presentation on privacy.
Surprise, I'm going to talk about privacy. Alright. So, I've been thinking a lot about privacy in general and really about a framework for privacy points and a framework for analyzing privacy points. And so, for those that don't know me, my name is Riccardo Spagni. You may know me as Fluffypony. And I'm going to talk a little bit about privacy in general, but just very briefly because there's an interesting panel that we're going to have on that later on. And I'm going to really focus on evaluating privacy technology or privacy enhancing technology as respects to cryptocurrencies. So, first off, why privacy matters and who does it matter to? The thing is, we live in a shifting landscape, and for a very long time we've had all these massive improvements in the way we transact. We've gone from cash to checks to wire transfers to debit and credit cards to transaction switching, and these are for regulation and anti-money laundering and know your customer rules, which are burdensome to financial companies because it shifts the balance of power, it shifts the burden of being an investigator from law enforcement to financial companies. But what is the impact on us as individuals? The impact on us as individuals is we get increased convenience, yay, but we get decreased privacy, and that's not great. And we've basically been like frogs in a pot of water that's slowly being brought to oil. We've not realized that we're losing our privacy because we've just been happy to get the added convenience. I can pay with my phone. I don't have to take my wallet with me when I go out. How cool is that? And I'm happy to give all my information to Facebook as long as I can continue playing Farmville. And because of these sacrifices in privacy, because of these compromises in privacy, we've ended up with the mess that we have today. And privacy is important. It's not just for criminals, it's for everyone. Because these are subtle things that we might want to avoid. And I think the big ones for me are targeted crime, which is becoming more prevalent, especially within the cryptocurrency space. If you pay a cashier and she now knows your Bitcoin balance, and she goes and tells her boyfriend, like, oh, you know, somebody paid in the shop today, and he has 100,000 Bitcoin, that's not great. Next minute you become a target. And unwitting complicity, unwitting complicitness in criminal acts is great as well. You know, you pay the cashier, she uses it to go buy drugs in the darknet market, and next minute you're snapped up in some sort of sweep. So these are all things that can and do happen, and it's only going to get progressively worse. And it's not just a blockchain problem, this is a problem with financial instruments in general. Now, what can we do about it? Well, there are a number of projects out there. In fact, there's tons of projects out there that are trying to find ways of improving our financial privacy. But as non-technical people, even as technical people who aren't deeply entrenched in the space, it's really difficult to evaluate what is snake oil and what is genuinely interesting privacy-enhancing technology. And so what I've tried to do is put together a framework, put together a set of pillars for us to evaluate privacy-enhancing cryptocurrencies. And we're going to go through them now. And the important thing to note, and I'll touch on this at the end as well, is this is really just a framework for understanding and analyzing whether the privacy-enhancing cryptocurrency does what it says in the tin. I'm not going to speak about whether its economic model is correct, whether it provides robustness and consensus mechanism, or anything like that, or whether it's even decentralized, because you can, use a database and provide a very, very powerful, centralized, completely private currency. It's just, not great from a decentralization perspective. So, what are these pillars? The 5 aspects of cryptocurrency privacy, as I like to define them, are firstly unlinkability. We want to be able to hide where transactions are going to. So nobody should be able to, through passive analysis, or through looking at the blockchain, or through any sort of other analysis, figure out that I am paying this particular address or this particular person. Untraceability, hide where transactions are coming from. So if I withdraw money from an exchange, I want to be able to tell ostensibly that I withdraw money from an exchange. And then cryptographically valueless, are we hiding transaction amounts? So even if somebody is able to make some guesses and go, well, I think Riccardo withdrew money from an exchange, can they tell how much I've withdrawn? And similarly, if I pay someone, can they tell what my wallet balance is? Fourthly, passively hidden, are we hiding transaction originating IPs? So are we hiding the IP addresses where transaction originates from? And lastly, optionality, are we maximizing the privacy set? And this is a very important one, and we'll discuss that towards the end. So let's start, and this is sort of like just an overview of how Monero works as it applies to these 5 aspects. Because, you know, as somebody who has done a lot of work with Monero and thinks that it's, you know, kind of cool, it's important to take this evaluating framework and then apply Monero to it and use that as an example of, you know, where Monero's strengths and weaknesses are. So, is Monero cryptographically unlinkable? Well, it is. So it uses something called dual key stealth addresses. And what happens is, you can see in this example, we've got 6 outputs in a transaction, and we can't actually see where they're going to, because that destination there is not the person's Monero address. It is a destination that is basically like a hash of the person's address, and that's a random in layman's terms. And so what this effectively means is when somebody looks at the blockchain, they can't tell which of these outputs are going to the recipient and which of the outputs are going back as change, or even if multiple outputs are going to the same recipient or to different recipients. They just end up looking like that. Now, what about untraceability? So untraceability, Monero uses something called ring signatures, and basically what we do, or what Monero does is, when you create a transaction, it takes a look at your copy of the blockchain, and it goes and selects a bunch of old outputs, and it creates something called a ring signature. So in this example, we've selected 5 outputs, plus the real output that we're going to spend. So a ring signature of 5 members. And we use something called a key image to prove that we're spending this output without revealing which output we're spending. So it's like a hash of the output in a sense. And we're able to validate that we have genuinely created a correct key image. And we're also able to validate, or nodes are able to validate, that a key image has not been spent more than once, because otherwise, using this scheme, you could go and spend the same output multiple times. And so effectively, you have this thing that looks like this. And to an observer, it seems that all of those outputs that are part of the ring signature are equiprobable. So the chance of an output being the correct one is the same as the next one. And this is really powerful because it gives you a great deal of, I mean, you know, if something had to approach you and say, is this one of your transactions? You could say no, because you have plausible deniability. That said, this is the weakest aspect of Monero's privacy, because choosing those outputs is genuinely hard. The thing is, people's spending patterns are weird, and we tend to think that people receive money and hold it for a long time, but they don't. They receive money and they spend it quite quickly. And so multiple weaknesses were discovered by the Monero Research Lab, which is an open research lab work group of open contributors, in January, or in 2014 and January 2015. And it took some time to figure out ways of fixing these. So one of the early naive attempts was switching to a triangular distribution. But we realized very quickly that it wasn't enough. We needed to really favor recent outputs because of people's spending patterns. We introduced something called RingCT, which was a game changer, and we're going to talk about RingCT next. Removed any possibility of creating very small ring signature sizes, with very few members or even with 0 members. And still, this isn't enough. This is really the weakest part of Monero's privacy, because with big data analysis, you can make all sorts of really interesting, educated guesses. So this is a part of Monero's privacy that requires constant improvement. Now, I spoke just now about RingCT and what does RingCT do. So RingCT is the way that we hide transaction amounts in Monero. And effectively what we do is we use something called Peterson commitments. And we basically create, when we're creating our ring signature, we sign the difference between the total number of inputs and the total number of outputs. And those should hopefully add up to 0. And then we use something called the range proof to make sure that those amounts are positive. And if you have positive amounts minus negative amounts and they add up to 0, we know that no new currency has been created with an A. And so effectively what you've got, just to pop back there, is that we can't tell the amounts. If somebody looks at the blockchain, they can see the range proofs, they can see the commitments, but they can't tell the actual amounts. So far so good. Now we've been able to solve really the first three. We've got a reasonable amount of untraceability. We have very strong unlinkability, and we're hiding transaction amounts. The next thing is hiding the IP address where a transaction originates from. Now, this is something that is recently become quite overblown. There have been a lot of projects who think that this is the only thing that you need to protect against. It's not. For an attacker to carry out an attack like this is extremely hard. They need to be resourceful and they need to set up a great number of nodes to civil attack your network. So how does that work? Well, in Bitcoin and in Monero and in most cryptocurrencies, transactions are broadcast to the network using something called flood fill. So there's my node in green, and when I broadcast a transaction, and those red ones are bad multi-logging nodes, when I broadcast a transaction, then it gets sent to the peers that I'm connected to. And then those peers send it on to other peers. Now, if an attacker has a sufficient number of multi-logging nodes in the network, they'll be able to determine my IP address as the one that was the first to broadcast this transaction. And that's obviously not ideal because, they can then determine that the transaction, regardless of its traceability, originated from this IP address within a reasonable measure of success. The issue here, like I said, is that this is a very hard attack to carry out, but still it's something that needs to be protected against. So how do we protect against it? There's a number of options, and the one that Monero has chosen is to run an overlay network. So we use Tor and ITP, and this overlay network runs on top of the normal network, and you can see the little green paths are where nodes are connected on this overlay network using Tor in this example, or ITP in this example. And then what happens is when my transaction is broadcast, the transaction is only broadcast on this overlay network, which means that by the time the logging node sees it, even if the logging node is the very first peer that I'm connected to, it doesn't matter because all they're ever going to get is an I2P address, which is, not really useful to them because they can't take that and convert it into an IP address. So we have a project called Copy, which is a rewrite of the ITP Java router in C++, and that is something that's been ongoing for quite a while. It's a lot of work, and that will hopefully eventually be baked into Monero itself. And in the meantime, we provide Tor support to be able to do this. Now, optionality is a big one as well. We want privacy to have a maximal data set, to have a maximal privacy set, because you want to get lost in the crowd. And if the crowd is only 5 people, then you're not going to get lost in it very well. Imagine if you're at a train station and you've got a bunch of people coming out the train station and you're looking for a guy with a red hat. Now, if there are 5 people, it's easy to spot the guy with a red hat. If there are 1,000 people, well, it's harder to spot the guy with a red hat, but chances are you're going to be able to spot him. But if there are 100,000 people and a bunch of them are wearing red hats, well, what are you going to do? You're not going to try and grab all of them and arrest them. So what does this mean practically? So there are a lot of projects out there that have this magical cloud of privacy. They run a normal blockchain, so a Bitcoin-like blockchain, and then they have this magical cloud of privacy, which let's assume that it provides absolute privacy, and people can hop in and out of that. The issue here is that your anonymity set is going to be restricted to how the total number of users in that magical cloud of privacy at best. And in fact, using proper analysis, it's probably a lot weaker and a lot smaller than that. So optionality is very bad. In fact, you want the opposite. You want default private with the ability to reveal transactions, either publicly or to a third party, which then doesn't have an impact on everyone else's privacy set. So, what does this actually boil down to? We've got these 5 pillars now. How do we actually use them to evaluate privacy-enhancing cryptocurrencies? So what I did is I put together a terribly biased sample evaluation to show you how you can use these to evaluate privacy-enhancing cryptocurrencies. And of course, you know, Monero scores super well in all of them. But the thing that is an issue, or the thing that I want to highlight here is that all of these aspects are aspects that can be improved. So it's not to say that, for example, Zcash is bad. Zcash has optionality, which basically destroys all of its privacy-enhancing technology. But as Zcash starts to become smaller, more compact, and easier to produce, and require less memory and less CPU time, then eventually, at some point in the distant future, Zcash will be able to hopefully make a switch to mandatory privacy, with that optionality being something that you can opt out of instead of something that you need to opt into. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this is just a single part of evaluating any cryptocurrency. And there are obviously there are other aspects of cryptocurrencies, even some of them that are on this board, that we might find distasteful. So, you know, maybe proof of stake, for example, is something that we don't like for a number of reasons, because it's not terribly robust. We prefer our cryptocurrencies to be proof of work-based, and this isn't something that this evaluation covers. But it does show you how to apply those 5 pillars to an existing technology and say, is this something that I think can enhance my privacy? Is this something that is really powerful? Now, the last thing I want to touch on is ideology, because this is really the 6th pillar that is often not spoken of. And ideology is very important. So, what are the Monero developers, and there have been over 500 developers that have worked on Monero over the past few years, and what do the Monero developers believe? So the Monero developers believe that our code is responsible for securing people's money. Obviously, I mean, that's, you know, a given. But we also know that our code is probably going to be required to protect someone's life savings, because no matter how often you tell people that Monero is not a speculative investment, people are going to ignore you and go and, you know, leverage their house and their life savings into, you know, that altcoin. And over and above that, we know that the privacy-enhancing aspects of our code might need to keep an innocent person out of jail. And so we can't really roll the dice with that. And lastly, Monero contributors are aware that our code might mean the difference between life or death for somebody. And so there's no way that we can take unnecessary risks, especially as respects the privacy-enhancing aspects. But the same goes for the economic code. Now, I'm of the opinion, and I know that there are many people that share this opinion, that any privacy-enhancing project, and not just a cryptocurrency, any privacy-enhancing project that treats their work with less care is not only irresponsible and disingenuous, but they are indistinguishable from a scam. And I think that ideology is a 6th hidden pillar that we generally don't speak about, but it's important to apply it as well. It's important to take a look at any privacy-enhancing project and say, what is the ideology of the contributors and the developers of it? Because if their ideology is, well, I'm doing this to get rich, then, you know, they don't really care about enhancing my privacy. All they care about is themselves. And that's all I wanted to talk about today. So thank you very much for your time.
So the morning session was put together on privacy. So what we're getting into is data and how you can protect data with privacy. So the next panel will be about taking control of your data. I'd like to invite Riccardo Spagni from Monero, Barra from Festy, and Hyunok from Hanyang University, and Ruben Somsen from the Seoul Bitcoin community to come up on stage, please.
So that concludes the panel. We just had a conversation here.
Hope everyone enjoyed it.
All right, so let's start the panel. So welcome everybody. We are here to talk about zero-knowledge proofs and taking control of your personal data. So we're going to talk about privacy, kind of why that's important for blockchains or perhaps even other applications. So we've got Graham here, we've got Fluffypony or Riccardo, and we've got Hyunok from Hanyang University. So maybe we'll start off with just a quick, brief introduction. So Graham, would you like to start? Just tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Sure, my name is Graham Barra. I'm interested in the philosophical underpinnings of why we're all here, and why we're interested in protecting ourselves with the implementation of technology. I think it's very important that we also consider personal freedoms and how we balance the convenience and privacy issue.
I'm Riccardo Spagni. I already did an intro earlier, so I'm not going to repeat it all, but I am a big believer in privacy as a basic human right, and that's one of the reasons that I'm talking as well.
I'm Hyunok from Hanyang University. Actually, I wasn't working in the privacy of the blockchain, but actually I'm working in the cryptography and also zero-knowledge first. And then I realized that zero-knowledge system is actually applied to the blockchain, so then we can solve privacy. So actually, my starting point is really different. I'm starting from the cryptography, and then I realized that privacy is a really big issue in blockchains.
All right, and I'm Ruben Somsen. I started the Seoul Bitcoin meetup here in Seoul in early 2014. So I've been in the space for quite a while. Yeah, I'm going to be moderating this panel today. All right, so the first, I think, point I would like to start with is just maybe kind of ease the audience into what zero-knowledge proofs are, and just kind of give some ideas of like how they can be applied. Riccardo, do you think you could give a simple explanation of what zero-knowledge proofs do?
Sure, so a zero-knowledge proof is the ability to prove that you know something without revealing that knowledge. So we have really simplistic examples of zero-knowledge proofs that we use on a regular basis. An example of that is something like a hash. So we know that a hash represents a particular set of data, maybe it represents a file or a message, and we can prove that the data represents the hash, but then we need that actual data. And so obviously with zero-knowledge proofs, we don't need the original source data to be able to validate it.
Perfect. And so I think what's important is, okay, so this is kind of a high-level overview of, okay, what is a zero-knowledge proof, but what can it be applied for? What is it useful for? So I think, Hyunok, earlier you gave some examples. Maybe you can start with the most simple example of what you can think of as a practical way of using zero-knowledge proofs for a blockchain.
As I mentioned in my slide, I think the first latest example, application will be the voting system, because voting system case the privacy is should be there. Actually, if the voting system does not support the privacy, then it's useless. Actually, there are many other applications as well as the voting system. For instance, so survey system, for instance. Survey system. In that case, we don't want to reveal our privacy, but some company want to collect some data, right? In that case, we have to provide the privacy. So I think it's depending on the application. Some application, again, the provider privacy is require a lot of computation, performance degradation, and also it is require a lot of memory. But I think in some application like a voting system, it is necessary. So in that case, we have to anyway provide the privacy.
Graham, do you think, specific to blockchains and currency, is there any specific use case there for zero-knowledge proofs?
Absolutely. I mean, if we consider what transactional data is being recorded today with the invention of the contactless Visa cards and contactless MasterCards that we're all well used to, some parts of the world, like T-Money or Octopus or Oyster, these are all just names for ways in which insurance companies can spy on you and understand what behavior what negative behavior you have. And so this is called surgical taxation, and we introduced this in my city in Cork, in Ireland in 2014 when the city decided to go cashless. It seemed like a great convenience at the time, but when an insurance company can understand how many pints you drink and how many steak dinners you consume on a weekly basis, this can affect your life insurance premium. So to look at some of the privacy coins, and interesting to hear Riccardo earlier talk about, like, you know, how Monero works. Actually, fundamentally, it's kind of learn something new, but by interacting with a medium of exchange that is inherently private, we can opt to choose what information we want to share with these third parties and what information we wish not to share with them. So with cash, this wasn't a problem, but now with banks and with credit cards, this has become a pretty large problem. So that's where I see blockchain being quite relevant in the 21st century.
So this really ties into the core of, I think, what this conversation is going to be about, which is why it's so important to have privacy and be able to hide that data. Ricardo, I think you have any opinions, other examples as to why it's so important that data remains hidden as opposed to it just being public on blockchain?
Sure. I think there's a general misconception that privacy is somehow inextricably linked with criminal acts, and it's important to get away from that and realize that privacy is more important to the average ordinary citizen than it is to a criminal, because the reality is that a criminal will always find a way to perform their criminal acts, regardless of, they're doing something illegal. You know, if you make the method of payment illegal, it's not going to make a difference. They're doing something illegal anyway. But to an ordinary citizen, there are all these barriers that have been put up that prevent us from transacting privately. And it leads to all sorts of things. You spoke about surgical taxation, which is just one example, but other things like targeted advertising. You know, do I really want advertisers to start feeding me adverts based on my spending habits? And the biggest issue is that there is a general apathy towards privacy. And that's something that I really think we need to change, because people don't realize how bad it is. And just one example is PayPal. So thanks to GDPR, we know now that PayPal in Europe, when you make a PayPal payment, your data is shared with 600 companies. I mean, that is a crazy number of companies that know that I just bought Lego online.
That sounds insane, I'm sure. I think it would be nice to see privacy be guaranteed at the base layer of whatever payments you're doing. So not have it be something you have to opt into, because, like you said, users don't even realize what they're giving away. So if it's the default, and that's what's happening on Monero. If you use Monero, it's private by default. I think that's kind of really important for that to not just be an option, but just everybody using it by default. Hyunok, do you have anything to add to the conversation of privacy and currency?
Okay, actually I want to add this comment about Ricardo. I think privacy is kind of giving some right to user. So actually before that time, the exposing of the data is actually depending on the manager or controller of the blockchain. But privacy preserved means that controlling is actually given to each user. Each user can decide whether they are exposing the data to the system or they want to hide the information. And also, he is saying about maybe the privacy preserving blockchain like Zcash or Monero can be misused in the criminal situation, but I think it can be solved in the technologically because, for instance, like zero Zcash case, we can add more strategies in the system and in the code. In that case, in normal case, the privacy is kept, but in some situation like a criminal case, maybe the government can track the system. In that case, we can make both cases, privacy and also protecting from the criminal also can be achieved.
Well, it seems to me personally that I think there's kind of a flaw there, at least in my opinion, because if you're hoping that the government keeps your data secure, then you can also just give your data to the government and they can just not reveal it, right? So I think the core is, or at least what I personally value, and I do agree that there are different views on this, but what I personally value is that even a powerful entity like the government cannot access my data.
What I'm saying is that if we are giving them right to the government only, then it can be, misused for data tracking. But if we are giving some key to some other institute, if they are all agreeing to that tracking, then in that case, it is only possible to track it. In that case, maybe it will be really safe.
Yeah, it's definitely an option, right? So it's possible for people who want that. All right, so I think one of the things that is also good to talk about is whether or not every use case actually requires a blockchain. So far, maybe we've talked a little bit about, I guess we've had two examples right now where we're talking about currency and some kind of cryptocurrency being private, but we also talked a little bit about the use for voting, for example. And one of the things that come to mind for me is that voting requires some kind of identity, right? You need to identify yourself, or you need to know that you're, if you're voting in Korea, somehow you have to prove that you're a person living in Korea that is making the votes, right? So there's somebody who's giving you the identity. And whether or not it makes sense to use blockchain for that, I would like to kind of discuss that. I don't know who would like to answer this, but I'm thinking maybe, Riccardo?
So the thing is that we often, over recent times anyway, we attribute these ideals to blockchain, like decentralization and permissionless and censorship resistant. But you can get a lot of those qualities from other things. So Tor is permissionless and censorship resistant and decentralized. So those qualities are not inherent to a blockchain-based application. In fact, with permission blockchains, you don't have any of those qualities. So I think it's important to separate the two. And you can, for example, have a voting system that doesn't use a blockchain at all. You can still have a centralized record keeper, which I think in the South Korean example is what they're trying to develop. And you can use something that is perfectly hiding, like zero knowledge proofs, or just any proof in general, really, where you're able to prove that I have a valid identity without revealing that identity, and then this is my vote.
So would you, in your personal opinion, do you think that falls under the term blockchain, or not really, or kind of?
I would say it's definitely not a blockchain.
Definitely
It's just a database.
Okay.
What about immutability? Would that be something that, maybe not just the vote, but the outcome of the vote, or the outcome of a debate, or politicians' promises, or something like that? Would the immutability over that record, not being able to be deleted or taken off the record later, would that come into play, or do you think centralized databases would solve that?
I think that with immutability, we already have a solve for immutability, and that's just public record. If it's out there and it's on CNN and the newspapers, then, yeah, there we go. But if a politician's promise is out there, and it's repeated over and over again, then it's almost like a gift, right? If everyone has a copy of your Git repo, then it's it's a decentralized source of truth. If everyone saw him give a speech on TV where he promised to build a wall,
Wasn't there? Didn't happen. No. I debate this a lot with people back home, and they kind of say if it's not recorded on a blockchain, if it's not this, that, or the other, I won't believe it happened. And they kind of switch themselves off from the rest of the world as if I don't believe it. I just choose to believe what I want to believe, and it's kind of this inherent problem with humans. Maybe we just we choose what reality we want. And yeah, it's kind of funny when you think about this as the essence of the value of blockchain. You really want blockchain for everything. Where does it end? I don't know.
I think the worst I saw, and not to go too far off topic, was an article about how during emergency situations like fires and earthquakes and that, emergency services really struggle to get through because all the cell phone channels are tied up by everyone trying to phone their loved ones. And blockchain can solve that. It can provide a channel for emergency services. There's just no thought given to reality. So you can't just take blockchain and slap it on everything and hope it works.
And one point I would like to add to that is that if there is some kind of use case where you're proving some event happened, usually it's going to be signed by an entity or multiple entities. So whether it's on an immutable blockchain or not, I think doesn't really matter. If if you hand like the signatures of every Korean citizen, whether it's on a blockchain or not, you can verify the signatures, right? It's still there. I mean, maybe they sign twice, that's maybe not a problem, but yeah, it's possible to verify. I think one of the points that you kind of alluded to is that there are maybe also some issues with potential breaches of the cryptographic security, where if you have a system where nobody can actually exactly verify how many coins everybody has, if that cryptography breaks in some way, there could be some potential problems, and they might not even be noticeable until when it's too late. Ricardo, I know you know a lot about it. I mean, you've already been talking about it, but I'd like to hear your opinion about this.
Sure, it's a problem. So one of the core tenets of a lot of those technologies is that you can't have something that is perfectly hiding, so something that is encrypted and anonymous and private, and also at the same time perfectly binding, so that in the context of a cryptocurrency, the economic system is secure and no one can create hidden inflation. And it's a really difficult problem because those trade-offs, I think from a design perspective, are hard to choose. You want to give users maximal security and maximal privacy, but those two are, you can't achieve both. So you can achieve maximal privacy at the cost of some security. And what happens if a person's life savings are in a particular currency and then the economic system bottoms out because someone figured out they can create 20 billion whatever out of thin air?
Yeah, I think one of the things that people underestimate is that if your privacy gets lost, we're not talking about your privacy today moving forward. We're talking about your entire history, because everything has been encrypted using these zero-knowledge proofs, and if that breaks, everybody can see everything that happened up until the beginning of this cryptocurrency. Hyunok, you have something to add here, or?
Yeah,
okay.
I want to add some comment about Riccardo, actually. So actually that is about, you mentioned about that, the privacy, and also I think it's kind of related with the fake proof, for instance, in the privacy blockchain case. So for instance, a zero cache case, if we know the some type of information, which is very important for the making the proof, if that type of information is leaked or it is misused by some other person, then it's very easy to create a new money. So which means that we can't control the whole money chain system, the coin systems. So when the zero cache team is creating the blockchain, the cache system, they are making some video to creating the key, and then how they are throwing the key safely. But actually, even though we are looking at that video, we cannot believe whether they are keeping the key or not. So that's the big issue. Not only in the German ecosystem, but also in the zero coin based, or maybe the same to the Monero or something. I think every coin has the same problem. I think the solution can be like a multi-party computation, for instance, when it is setting up. Many people are involved in that creating that key, then maybe it will be safer, or maybe updatable. For instance, this year there is new paper about the updatable. They can solve the problem, but anyway, still we need some spend more time on the research. How can you safely creating the new coin system?
So just to I think summarize a little bit, because what you're talking about now I think is quite complex. So you're talking about the trusted setup, where if there are certain zero-knowledge systems where in order to start using the system first, somebody needs to come and think of a secret number, and then never reveal it, and you forget about it, delete it himself, but it needs to be created. And in the case of Zcash, they had like a group of people doing that together. So if all of them remembered their secret number and all of them got together, then the system could potentially be broken. But then the problem is that if you didn't participate in the ceremony, you never know for sure whether or not that actually happened. I believe in Monero there's not a problem like this. I think it depends on the cryptography that you use. Ricardo, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so Monero doesn't have a trusted setup. I think over and above the trusted setup risk and the risk of the trapdoor process being compromised or or anything like that. You also have this other issue of a potential break in cryptography, or even a break in implementation. So we found a bug last year with Monero that we thankfully patched without incident, where due to subgroup elements in the elliptic curve that we use, which weren't checked for, you could create hidden inflation with Monero. And that had nothing to do with a trusted setup or anything like that. In fact, it wasn't even a cryptography issue, it was an implementation issue. It was something that had been missed in the implementation. So, with all of this stuff, I think it's important to remember that it is zero knowledge proofs in particular are so new, and there's so much new and difficult to understand math behind it, that we're probably quite a while away from getting to a point where production systems can largely be trusted.
So I think you're bringing up also an interesting point here, because you mentioned this bug, and if I'm not mistaken, there could have been a scenario where a hacker or somebody found that bug, abused it, and then it wouldn't have been obvious that it was used, right? So there would have been some kind of inflation, but nobody would have noticed. Is that correct?
So no one would have noticed until the bug was found. Once the bug's found, then it's easy to spot the abuse map.
Okay.
But until it's found,
this particular case, no?
Yeah, but ostensibly there could be a case where, due to, again, cryptography or implementation failures, a hidden inflation could occur and it could never be found.
Hyunok, earlier you mentioned that there are there's also the consideration of performance. Maybe you can explain to the audience a little bit like what the issue is there and why performance matters in these systems.
Okay. I take an example about the Zcash case. So, I mean, the Zcash is very good because it's using the general functions, and also it can hide everything like a transaction, money, everything. The problem is that actually creating the proof takes a lot of time. So, for instance, the Zcash case, nowadays it is optimized, but if it's not optimized, then it's like 2 minutes to create one proof. And also, to generate the proof, the memory requirement, for instance, in key size, is like 1 gigabyte. So it is very large, actually. And also, if we are trying to add some other functionality in the function, then the key size is becoming larger and larger, and also performance degradation is so much, it's cannot be useful in practice.
And I think for Monero, it's also kind of the case, right, where you have this trade-off where because you're guaranteeing the privacy compared to maybe something like Bitcoin, you have like different scaling issues, right? Like I don't know if there's a number that you can like how many transactions per second are possible in Monero today?
Sure. So Monero's transaction creation and validation is extremely fast. It's slightly slower than Bitcoin's in many ways. The issue comes in, or there's several issues that come into play. The first issue really is transaction sizes. So recently bulletproofs went live on Monero, and bulletproofs reduces the range proof sizes to a much more compact range proof. But still, Monero's transaction sizes are significantly bigger than Bitcoin's, orders of magnitude bigger. And so that has an impact not only in the number of transactions that you can process through the network, because you have to flood fill the network with every transaction, but it also has an impact in terms of the blockchain size, because you have to store them on the blockchain. And I mean, there's a pruning model where you can throw away range proofs later on, but at least for some time, that blockchain needs to keep all of the signatures, all of the range proofs, and so on. So it is definitely a trade-off. You've got the scalability trade-off, but you have increased privacy, and it's. I sometimes wonder if Bitcoin had been designed with that sort of privacy at the beginning, if we'd just be used to the trade-off, and we'd go, no, it'd be crazy to design a system that is more compact, but gives away the privacy.
Yeah, my personal opinion on that is definitely that there is some. It's very difficult for a decentralized system, and I think Bitcoin is maybe like very decentralized in terms of like changing things. It's very difficult to make radical changes. Adding something like bulletproofs to get like similar privacy to Monero, it would be like increasing the block size by at least 5 times. So you just it's like smaller blocks, less transactions, and Bitcoin already has a low amount of transactions and people are already like unhappy about it. So that would be a very difficult thing to change. Graham, I haven't really gotten to you, but is there anything you would like to add to this?
Sure. I suppose just ask the question, why privacy? Do people care about privacy? I don't know how many people here actually consider their day-to-day activities. I'd be curious. Probably 99% of people just don't care. So, where does it, do we just end the transactional data? Is it like just for Monero, for example? But do you find like we're just going to get a percentage of the population who will opt in to a Monero? Because it still is opt-in. It's not going to be the default thing by a government. A government will use it when it suits them, like DARPA funds, Zcash. Monero is probably being used by different governments around the world, and that's where its real use case is for me. But for general population, does anyone here care? Do they use privacy coins? I'd be curious to know, to open up that conversation.
I think that there's definitely a general apathy towards privacy. There was an interesting study that was conducted about in the USA about people's attitudes towards data and towards data privacy in a post-Snowden world. So this was after the Snowden revelations, and everyone went, oh dear, my data, oh the NSA, everyone's bad. And then they conducted a study, and one of the pieces of data that they asked was people's like medical records. Did they consider that private? And 55% of people said yes. My medical data is reasonably private. 55%. I mean, that means 45% of people in the USA think that their medical data can be out in public for anyone to abuse. That's crazy. And then like spending habits, 15% said that spending habits were important. I mean, that is like a minuscule part of the population that go, my spending habits should be kept private. I mean, people just don't realize the knock-on effect of this stuff. And it's little things like, you make a donation to an organization, and if your boss finds that unpalatable or distasteful, the next minute you get fired. I mean, this data should be kept private for so many reasons.
And I think one of the examples you gave earlier I thought very interesting, which is that you have all this data out there, and these days there's so much computational power that it's very easy to make a model of like any person and just kind of figure out what their habits are and then play into that in such a way that you're enticed to buy a certain product or do a certain thing. And I think it's gotten to the point where a regular human being can't keep track of that. You can't think about like, if I put this message out on Twitter, then the marketing agencies will start to market certain very beautiful shoes to me and try to get me to buy more of them. And there's something kind of it takes away like this autonomy, right? Where you are doing things for yourself, and now you're being tricked more and more into behaving a certain way for a certain gains. And we see that in the news these days, where there's lots of conflicting or a lot of articles that make you upset or divide groups divide people into multiple groups where they fight each other, because that's kind of where a lot of the attention comes from, and then you get more clicks for news articles, and all that stuff is kind of getting out of hand, and it just needs to, some smart people, I think, need to sit down and create a system where you just don't have to worry about that. You don't have the mental capacity to think about that and to address that every day and think, should I make sure this is private, or should I just not be private? You can't think about that. The consequences are so complicated that it's just impossible.
Yeah, and I think what's crazy is we sometimes fool ourselves into believing that we can blend in. But if you have a smartphone and you have 5 applications installed, that is enough to uniquely identify you with over 98% accuracy.
Wow.
Just 5 apps.
That's crazy. I don't know if that's true in Korea, though. Like everybody uses KakaoTalk, Naver Maps. I can name 5 apps that every person has and stuff, but I get the point.
So I guess the answer is to improve education, maybe on a university level, but beyond that as well. I don't know, Professor, do you see your students coming in your courses? Do they become aware of these issues? Do they practice these issues in their day-to-day life?
Actually, I'm trying to explain what's the privacy issue in the blockchain, but the problem is that the mathematical behind about the privacy issue is very hard to understand. So I'm teaching the mathematical cryptography in the graduate course, but in the undergraduate course, it's hard to actually explain about that.
Yeah.
Another comment about that, the privacy issue. So actually, Riccardo and Graham is saying about that the privacy is sometimes it's important, but there are a lot of people who are not caring about the privacy issue. But the problem is that I think that the government is actually regulating the privacy issue. So the current blockchain case, I mean, is either we can choose it's a public, it's not private or privacy blockchain. But the problem is that for instance, the Korean government is very strict to the privacy issue. So it's very strict, and also Europe, the GDPR is very strong. So to keep that legal issue, I think the privacy in the blockchain will be more and more important, and maybe it will be the basic feature in the blockchain.
Yeah, I wouldn't say GDPR, I'd say there was probably trade-offs made between governments within the negotiations of GDPR. When you actually read the text, there's certain articles that kind of say, but it's down to the national laws of the country at the end of the day. So you kind of have this area where you can kind of derogate from human rights in certain circumstances, including state of emergencies. So if you just say, oh, terrorism, well, that's the reason I can get away from these issues. I think GDPR, time will tell whether it's actually effective or not. My prediction is it's a good step, but I don't think it's far enough. And I know California had recently passed an act that by 2020 they'll have a similar system as GDPR, but really, I don't know will I put my trust in the government and policymakers to do this for me. I think I'd just rather do it myself. But that's the problem. How do I reach a mass audience without the government's help? So you obviously have to work within the system to change it as well.
Yeah, all right. I'm out of questions myself. Is there anything, before we run out of time, we have about 2 minutes left, I think. Is there any final remarks anybody would like to make?
I think it's just privacy, achieving any state of privacy in your own personal life right now is legitimately hard. To the point where it's almost impossible. But if we don't start, I think as individuals, and if we don't start talking about it and keeping the conversation going now, then as privacy becomes more accessible, it'll be too late. Our data is out there in ways that are beyond our control. Facebook has incredibly powerful facial recognition, and if our friend puts up a photo of us, then Facebook identifies our face. And if another friend puts up another photo of us, well, now Facebook builds a social graph. This is information out of our control. You can't prevent your friends from taking photos and uploading it to Facebook. But what you can do is just start taking back control of your personal data, of the data that you can influence, not the data that's already at our schools.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful remark. Anything else?
Yeah, I echo that. I think it is really a consumer-driven market at the end of the day. So the more we educate, the more we talk about this, the more we get it out to the mass audience, consumers can drive this. They can say no to Facebook. They can just literally just delete accounts, sign out. And I probably haven't signed into my Facebook account maybe once over the last 2 years. It's just, life is okay without it, So I don't need to have these services as much as I maybe thought I did just because everybody does it. So, don't subscribe to the norm.
Right. Great. Well, that's it for today. We're out of time now. So thanks to our panelists, and thank you all for listening. Thank you.